so we understand straight away that this old commanding officer is sick, and actually he dies before he's produced any results. And so the people that he was helping out, their problem is still unresolved, and with the intervention of the old guy's daughter, Reacher is asked to take on the responsibility, which he does for two reasons really. One, out of loyalty to his old commanding officer, and secondly, because these people, the old couple who need help, definitely need help. You know, they're a very touching and pathetic old couple, and that kind of brings out something in Reacher that he can't say no to a worthy cause.
Well, it certainly, he was a little more human, I think, in that book because of these connections and because of his emotional reaction.
That's a good point, because I felt after the first two books, it's established that he's a man with no context in the present. You know, as I said, he has no friends, no job, no home, no nothing. And so he must have something. And so I was thinking, okay, let's make it, he's got a past, you know, he's got emotional roots in the past. If he's got no roots in the present, he must have roots somewhere, and let's look at the roots from the past. And that was very effective, yeah.
It was very effective, and this is the book where the daughter of the man carries over into the next book, Running Blind, or the British title was. Is that's the one that's called The Visitor in the British form?
Yeah.
And so Reacher is still connected to this woman, even though he opens up, and I love the opening scene in that book. I think it's absolutely tremendous in the restaurant where the guys are trying to move in on somebody to, and it's a protection racket, and Reacher, he's just eating there, right? It's another one of those things. And Reacher says, no, I don't think so. And
yeah. Well, that's, funnily enough, in the book that nobody will read until next year that I just finished, I kind of address that. I mean, why would Reacher do that, actually? And there's a question asked in next year's book, you know, basically something like, why are you like this? Why are you doing this? And he starts to give a sort of answer where he says, I think the actual question is, why did you become a military cop? And he said, well, I wanted to be a cop because cops, you know, they look after the little guy. And the person he's talking to says, that's it. And then he pauses for a moment and comes out with a completely honest answer, and he says, no, I don't really care about the little guy. I just hate the big guy.
Interesting. I actually thought that he'd done that thing in the restaurant just because he could.
That's a good point. And it's the point that actually my editors have never quite grasped, because the editors always want very overt cause and effect, you know, motivation. Why does he do this? And I preferred, like you said, just because he can, a sort of noblesse oblige, that he can, therefore he will. There doesn't need to be a specific motivation.
No,
in
not
my
at
mind.
all. And he, you know, it also, I suppose, in a way, it's just kind of a test of his skills, so if he's still sharp and on the game.
Yeah.
And he has really nothing to lose either.
Yeah.
Although in that book, because that's the one where he does have an emotional connection with this woman from the preceding book, from Tripwire, he maybe does have something to lose. So it was an interesting juxtaposition that you gave him, this scene where he could actually die for nothing, so to speak, at a moment when he had something. I kind of like that. There was some irony in there, which I thought was interesting. And then you move on, another woman, we get Carmen in the Cadillac. He's just on the road in the middle of a blazing Texas summer and gets stranded, and here she drives up in the Cadillac.
That's a very different book, really, because if you think about it, all the previous books have involved establishment of some kind, you know, be it FBI or the military itself, or, you know, some kind of bigness in terms of the machinery. Echo Burning is a purely local, small cast family story in the wilds of West Texas, which is, I've been there, and it is so incomprehensible. I mean, to an European, it's completely incomprehensible. To somebody from the East Coast of America, it's incomprehensible. Maybe even for people that live in Phoenix, it's incomprehensible how vast and empty that part of the country is. I mean, I met a woman who had to drive 5 hours to get to the grocery. And I met a family they live so far from anywhere else, they get their newspaper a day late. They call it USA Yesterday. this is so isolated, and this was just a tiny group of people in this vast landscape, and there was no, no federal stuff, no government, no nothing. It's just about them. And yeah, as you say, Reacher he's actually had a fight in a bar and won, of course, but what he doesn't realize until the next morning is that the guy was an off-duty cop, and he thinks in Texas it's probably not smart to have busted an off-duty cop's nose, and so he's hightailing it out of town. It's 100+ degrees, and he's worried about anybody stopping to pick him up. But sure enough, this beautiful kind of 30-year-old Latina stops a bone-white Cadillac and offers him a ride. He gets in, obviously, they get out of town, and she starts telling him her story, which is a pretty horrible story. But the question for Reacher, and actually for the reader, is she telling the truth? And that was, it was a tricky book to like, and it's a tricky book for people to relate to, because I needed to have this woman ambivalent. The reader has to be unconvinced by her.
Well, she's an unreliable narrator, which is a very tricky device.
Mm-hmm. And so it's actually, I mean, I like that book very much, but many people, it's their least favorite of the 6.
I think it's the one where what he does is the least sympathetic in lots of ways. Because basically she wants him to kill her husband.
Right.
Because she claims that the husband is abusing her.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really taking the law into his hands in a more direct way than when he was rescuing the woman who was kidnapped at the dry cleaners, or trying to, get out of the homicide charge in Georgia, or the really bad guy was going after, his former friends in the military. He has no personal connection to this woman, so it's a real vigilante
It is,
role.
And to be fair to him, he does make that point in the narration. He says that he won't do it because it is cold-blooded, and he would be prepared to do something hot-blooded, but not cold-blooded. And so he compromises with her and says what he will do is go home with her and try and get hired on as some kind of ranch hand or something, just so that he's around as a witness, at least. And that leads to quite a comic scene where he's asked to saddle a horse, and he's never even seen a horse. So
what kind of knight is he? With no steed.
He's a mechanized 20th century knight.
Yes.
So that was a fun bit to write. But then he sticks around, and actually the guy does die, but Reacher doesn't kill him, and then it's a question of finding out who was telling the truth all along and what is behind the whole thing. I actually really liked the book, and I was very happy with it. But it does stand out as slightly different in the series, I think.
It's interesting, too, to me, and as you know, I talk to hundreds of authors. Oftentimes, authors fall in love with stories that readers don't necessarily fall in love with.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, too, authors don't even know what their best work is. I've found that, there's...
I'm comfortable with that feeling because, especially when the book is still relatively fresh in your mind, you have no idea what it is even. As you've pointed out, the first book, Killing Floor, is absolutely a Western.
Oh, it is, in classic form.
Yeah, absolutely, and I didn't know that. I had no idea of that until a couple of years afterwards when I really thought about it. I said, wait a minute, that is a pure Western structure. And, it's like that old joke about you're painting the side of an elephant or something, and it's not until you're 10 paces away that you even know it's an elephant. And so you're way too close to a book to really be able to judge its worth or how it ranks with any other book, or really even what it is,
If it will comfort you, I have just finished editing a book that we are going to publish in the fall, which has a wonderful title. It's called Beware the Solitary Drinker, which I think is a fabulous title. And I want to tell you, it was on like the 5th rewrite that I put this poor man through, that it finally occurred to me what the book was about. I mean, I'd been groping for it. I knew there was an overall theme to it, and basically it's a father and son theme. And what was wrong with the book that I couldn't get to grips with was the fact that while this guy was operating in that mode for everyone else, for his own child, he was behaving totally differently. And the book didn't hang together. But as soon as one could grasp the elephant, one could see it. And